I am malicious because I am miserable. Am I not shunned and hated by all of mankind? You, my creator, would tear me to pieces and triumph. Shall I respect man when he condemns me? Let him live with me in the interchange of kindness. But that cannot be. The human senses are insurmountable barriers to our union. Yet mine shall not be the submission of abject slavery. I will revenge my injuries. If I cannot inspire love, I will cause fear, and chiefly towards you, my archenemy, because my creator. Do I swear an extinguishable hatred?
Frankenstein is not what you think it is, or at least not what I thought it was before I read the book for the first time recently. In popular culture, Frankenstein's monster is often portrayed as a sickly green-coloured zombie with heavy boots and bolts through his neck. Most people don't even realise that Frankenstein is the doctor who created the monster and not the monster himself, and I'm probably going to mess up at some point in this review and accidentally call the monster Frankenstein, but you know. But I think the thing that's going to be most surprising to new readers is how layered with themes this book is, and how many questions it asks of the reader. Questions that haven't left me in the days since I finished reading this book that was written by a teenager over 200 years ago. A lot of people, when they pick up this book, they hear that it's the very first sci-fi, and I think it is the first sci-fi that I'm aware of. You can correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of people as well are going to be expecting horror, but to me, this book is pure tragedy. It's a tragedy about ambition, neglect, and revenge. It's pretty camp, it's pretty angsty, and I loved it. Today, we're going to be talking about Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. The story begins with Robert Walton, who is an English explorer who's travelling north of the Arctic Circle. They get stuck in the ice, him and the crew, and he's feeling isolated, he's feeling really down, he's writing letters to his sister, he's just not connecting with the crew. But luckily for him, they come across Victor Frankenstein, who is travelling on the ice. They bring Frankenstein onto the ship, and he tells them the story of how he ended up here in this icy wasteland. And this is a story that Robert, the explorer, relays to his sister. People relaying stories to someone else seems to be like such a popular storytelling device in classic horror. We saw it in Dracula and the epistolary format that book had. We see it in The Turn of the Screw. We see it in The Fall of the House of Usher. These are all books that I've been reviewing this month. And by the way, if you're interested in classic horror, subscribe to the channel because I talk about it quite a lot. But I think the reason that the epistolary format is so popular, and the reason that it's really works, especially in classic horror, it turns a book into a journal or a letter to a friend that we've kind of stumbled across. And it just adds another layer of authenticity to the story. It makes everything feel a little bit more real. So the crew all gather around Victor Frankenstein, and he starts to tell them about his childhood in Geneva. And the picture that he paints is very warm and loving. He has a supportive family that are all there for one another. We see the beginnings of his love for Elizabeth. Everything seems nice. The fact that he comes from such a nurturing and stable foundation makes the recklessness and the selfishness that he exhibits later on all the more shocking. And it's also kind of like a nice contrast, right? We've started in this kind of barren, icy wasteland, and now we're in kind of a warmer climate in Switzerland. Not so warm, but, just like a nice, warm, loving atmosphere. We know that Frankenstein hasn't been corrupted by his upbringing, by his past, by anything external. He has been corrupted by one thing and one thing only, and that thing is personal ambition. He wants to be a great man like the great men of science before him, and he just passionately dives into these old science books, which the modern science community has kind of relegated to the dustbin of history. He has this obsession to just conquer nature and become like a god, or a modern Prometheus. By the way, this book is also known as the Modern Prometheus. If you want to sound a little bit clever or extremely pretentious, then I'll explain this part. In Greek mythology, Prometheus was the titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. This act of giving humanity knowledge and capabilities was a transgression against the gods' will, particularly Zeus. So yeah, Prometheus, this book is called The Modern Prometheus. Back to the story. Anyway, this obsession leads Frankenstein to create life from death. He collects body parts, I think he's grave robbing, and he combines them together and he creates new life. He does what the science community believes is impossible. And this led, for me, to one of the most surprising scenes in the whole book. When the monster opens its eyes, popular culture had led me to believe that this was a triumphant scene for Frankenstein. It's alive! It's alive! As the thunder and lightning roars and strikes around him, and it's just this moment where he's succeeded. But actually, it's nothing like that in the original text. He is horrified with what he's created, and he runs from the scene. When he comes back, the monster is gone. And this scene, for me, was just so impactful. It's so amazing to me, and I think we can see it reflected in so many areas of life, that a person can be so immersed in an activity, in a goal, to see whether or not they can do it, that they're too busy seeing if they can to wonder if they should, until they do. Also, another thing that made this scene just so memorable, I don't think I'm ever going to forget this scene, is when the monster opens its eyes and it kind of tries to communicate with Frankenstein. It reaches out its hand and it makes a noise. It doesn't know how to speak. And it makes a noise, just kind of, and then Frankenstein leaves. So this is horrific for Frankenstein. And it's also horrific, more so, I think, for the monster. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the monster for a second. You open your eyes, you're exposed to the world, and you see what is really a makeshift god, a makeshift parent, the person who you are most connected to. And the first thing that happens in your life on this earth is that you are rejected. This is the first of a list of tragedies that very quickly spirals out of control. Soon after this, Frankenstein is called back home. His little brother has been taken out, and he knows it's the monster that did it. He knows, but he can't tell anyone about it because they're going to think he's nuts. He's the only person that's seen the monster. And at this point, honestly, I actually was starting to question whether or not the monster was real, or if Frankenstein was genuinely having delusions. There's kind of a question of how the monster is able to move around largely undetected. It's kind of mysterious. And I started to think, is that going to be a big twist at the end. This isn't exactly what I was expecting already. Is that going to be a huge twist at the end? That would have been pretty cool, but no, I don't think that is the case. Anyway, to make things even worse, Justine, who is a family friend of Frankenstein, and also I think like the maid of Frankenstein's house, someone that he cares a great deal about, she actually gets framed for the murder of his younger brother. And so effectively, the monster has taken out two people that Frankenstein cares a great deal about. And at this point, the story is just completely being told from Frankenstein's perspective. And so naturally, it's very easy for us to side completely with Frankenstein and not at all with the monster. The only thing that we know about the monster at this point is that it woke up, went, and then took out a little boy and framed an innocent woman. He's taking out innocent lives all around. And so we see this creature as the evil force. But later on, when we're given another perspective, we realize that there are no good or evil forces. This isn't a battle between good and evil. There really are no purely good beings in this story. And the fact that there are no good guys in this story doesn't prevent us from having sympathy for the characters. It just allows us to have sympathy for evil. And this is a problem that I had when I read and reviewed Dracula, right? Was the simplicity of good versus evil. The good guys are completely good guys. And someone in the comments said, well, the reason that they come across as good guys is because they're the ones that are telling the story, right? So they're kind of shaping the narrative to make themselves appear to be better than they really were. And that's really interesting, actually. But from my first read through of Dracula, it just really felt like we had good and we had evil. And good, just all they wanted was for good things to happen, and evil were just evil because at the end of the day, what are they going to do? They are evil, so they want evil. Too simplistic. And then next up is what to me is the best section of the entire book. And that is when the monster is able to convince Frankenstein to listen to him. Just listen to me and I will tell you what has taken place in the last couple of years since you created me. It begins, everything's kind of like a blur, like he's just been born, you know? He learns what he is. He learns what his surroundings are. He learns words. He learns language. I think that probably what is the case is that there's some residual knowledge that has been left over from the previous owner of the brain, right? So it's kind of like kept some of the knowledge in it, and it's just being reawakened. But yeah, I mean, I found these scenes to be excellent. The monster is kind of hiding in the woods and he stumbles upon this cottage that's completely isolated. And this is where the book becomes a story within a story within a story within a story. Yeah, we learn all about this family's woes and their history and their overcoming of the odds. Unlike Frankenstein, who was born into wealth and privilege, this family are completely underdogs, and it kind of makes it very easy to root for them. The monster roots for them as well. He's kind of like listening to their story and he sympathizes with them. He starts to help them. He collects wood. He notices one of the characters goes out every day to chop wood. So of a nighttime, he goes out to collect the wood and he drops off the wood at the foot of the cottage, right? And so they kind of think, oh, we've got like fairies or a nymph that's helping us out. And he always remains hidden. You know, he's very conscious of the fact that he is repulsive to people. And so he remains hidden to protect them, but really to protect himself. And anyway, he's watching this family for over a year. And he finally decides, do you know what? I love these people. They are the only family that I know. And even though they're not aware of me, I feel like I love them. And we as the reader like them as well. We know that they're good people, right? And so he makes a decision, okay, I'm going to take a chance and I'm going to reveal myself to them. I'm going to talk to the old man first. The old man's blind, right? I'm going to go and talk to the old man and explain to him my story. And these are good people. They know what it is to struggle. They know what it is to be persecuted against. And so he will understand. If anyone will understand, he will understand. And so the young couple go away or I think there's 3 people. They go away and he approaches the blind man. And this scene, my heart was in my throat. The one thing that the monster wants is to belong with people. And this scene, you know what's coming is going to be either one thing or it's going to be another. Either he is going to be accepted and all of his dreams are going to come true because he's going to have a kind of like a family, or he's going to be rejected in the cruelest way imaginable and all of his fears will be confirmed. And when someone opens themselves up and makes themselves vulnerable and puts everything on the line, you can't help but root for them. Anyway, they beat the crap out of him. They beat the crap out of him. This is so hard because Mary Shelley has spent time telling us these people's story and making us like them and feel sympathy for them. We know that these people are not evil. So again, I want you to imagine from the monster's perspective. You were rejected by your creator. You were rejected by your father. You found a new family. You know that they are good and they rejected you as well. And if they are good and they rejected you, then you are bad. Whew. It's a good book. Like and subscribe. The monster tries a few more times to fit in with society unsuccessfully, and it ultimately leads to the monster taking the life of Frankenstein's younger brother. And now we're kind of caught up back with Frankenstein's story, back where we left off. The monster begs Frankenstein, listen, I just don't want to be alone. You've created me. Create my counterpart. I want someone or something to love. And that's your responsibility. You did this and you have a responsibility to me. And he asks for what is effectively a wife or a loved one, a companion. And at first, Frankenstein agrees. He says, listen, if you leave me and my family alone and disappear and go off into the wilderness, I will create something. And then he starts to create it and he starts to have those old feelings and he decides, no, I can't do this because there's no guarantees that he'll leave or that my new creation, the female version of the monster, there's no guarantees that she will feel the same way that he feels and that she'll agree to go off into the wilderness. She might even convince him to do more evil. Can't do it. So he reneges on the agreement and the monster don't like that. He don't like that. Later on, he takes the life of Frankenstein's friend. He takes the life of Frankenstein's wife. That leads us to the point where Frankenstein pursues him. The monster is not good, but he is a product of his design. The most interesting thing about these two characters is really the contrast between them, but also how they've taken completely different paths to end up in the same destination, right? So on one hand, you've got Frankenstein. He has been given everything. He's had every privilege. He was raised with a loving family. He had wealth. He had a good education. He had everything that a person could reasonably ask for. And then you've got the monster who was really given nothing. No guidance, no formal education. He's repulsive. He has no friends, no one that loves him. He's completely isolated. And whilst it is ambition that has made Frankenstein cold, it's the world that has made the monster cold. Think about it, right? The monster starts off as wholesome and innocent, as kind of wide-eyed. He knows what rejection is. But he starts off and is pure, and all he wants is love. But by being exposed to the world, he learns what it is to be rejected. He learns what it is to fear. He learns what it is to hate and to want vengeance and to want to destroy. And in learning these things, he learns what it is to be a man. Eventually, driven by vengeance, both of them race to what is practically the ends of the earth. Frankenstein hunts down the monster constantly taunting him. Come on, come on, come on. Then we arrive back in the present with the adventurer, Robert Walton, who was at the beginning of the story. Here, after Frankenstein finishes his story, he tries to kind of implore Walton to not hunt down the creature, but he just can't accept that he's going to leave the world and the monster will still be present. But eventually that is what happens. It passes away, and then soon after, the monster arrives, and he is really the last person that's there to mourn the loss. Even after everything, he still mourns Frankenstein. And he says to Walton, listen, I will take the body and I will join him. I will take my own life and I think he says that he'll throw himself in the fire and they'll burn together. Wow. I finished this book a few days ago. There's probably so many layers that I didn't include in this review. I think that I'll never stop thinking about this book. It's a really, really good one. I enjoyed it a lot. This is actually book number 6 of the 10 classic horrors that I'll be reading this month and reviewing. And so next up, book number 7 is going to be The Picture of Dorian Gray. If you'd like to see my review to that, you can click up here. Thanks so much for watching this review. I really enjoyed reading this book. I really enjoyed making this review. And yeah, thanks for watching. Happy reading.